whereby she cannot be able to afford even to buy another piece of land, Mr. Speaker. And you realize they invest a lot. They have been making a lot of savings. And maybe probably some of those savings that they have made is what they use to buy and to purchase those land, Mr. Speaker. The DCI, the EACC must rise to the occasion, Mr. Speaker. The directors of these institutions, the directors of these companies, they are driving very huge vehicles. They have very serious homes, maybe other things in Karen and Runda and other places, posh places, Mr. Speaker, at the expense of the public, at the expense of the citizen of this republic, Mr. Speaker. We therefore call upon the DCI, because we want to see these people, their accounts closed, even their personal accounts, even the accounts that belongs to their wives should be closed, Mr. Speaker, so that those people who have invested money with Cytons and other land companies, they have been using those opportunities, you know, to publicize, to market their company on how they are assisting Kenyans who are vulnerable to purchase lands and even to own homes and properties, Mr. Speaker. So we must also make sure that we put measures, and the DCI lies to the occasion, Mr. Speaker, put up measures whereby he's going to make sure that he goes after their properties, after their personal properties, so that they become a lesson to them and even to other people who are in business, not of selling land, Mr. Speaker, but of, you know, stealing from the citizens, stealing from the people, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, this motion, I support it. The DCI, the EACC, they must rise to the occasion, Mr. Speaker, and I therefore support the motion by Honorable Atandi. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Ferdinand Wanyonyi. Ferdinand Wanyonyi. The chair who was in the speaker's chair tells me you had been lined to speak.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I've had a very long delay here. I want to speak on this motion. And I want to say, first and foremost, this particular organization, we need to know where it's coming from. Because, the Speaker, this particular organization is actually one that actually has been conning Kenyans money. Last weekend, unfortunately, they came up to my residence in Kitale. Very nice vehicle, walked in there. I didn't know who they were. And then, of course, they even sent the religious people to come and persuade. So yesterday, when I was at home on Saturday, somebody drives into my compound. I didn't even know who he was. Only be surprised that this was one of the organizers, leaders in Trans Nzoia, trying to convince me to join this, to invest in this particular group. I got because they were very persuasive. And I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, I almost got attempted because they were asking for some money. And I said, I don't have, why don't they give me time so I can be able to look at what is happening? Mr. Speaker, only to find that when I come here, there's a motion on the same. I want to caution members of parliament. These guys are very persuasive. They will come to you and will give you all sorts of good things about this particular organization. The question is, what is happening to the marketing commission in this country, and why is these people actually licensed to come over and give this kind of attraction? And at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, there's nothing. So we should be able to, as a committee, I think there's a committee on petition. I suggest that the committee for petition calls the marketing, what do you call the marketing, what? The marketing commission here to come and explain to us who these people are, because I'm told they are from US, the Capital Marketing Authority, to come before this committee to be able to explain to us who these people are. Because when it comes to the Speaker, when it comes to these people on advertisement, they give you all sorts of things. And I can tell you, somebody mentioned in the morning that when something is so sweet, think twice before you accept. Because they come very persuasive, Mr. Speaker, and I want the committee on petition to call the authority to come up and explain to us who these people are, because they are actually conning the Kenyans. With those few remarks, I want to support the motion and look forward to these people coming to tell us who they are, because they are all over the place in the advertisements or what have you, and therefore we should be able to actually find out who these people are so I can be able to deal with them squarely. I support.
Thank you, Honorable Ferdinand. Honorable members, the screen is full. I don't know what you have logged in for, so if you raise your hands, it will be easier. Oundo?
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I stand to support the petition, the report of the Public Petitions Committee, and the motion as proposed to be amended by Honorable Atandi. Honorable Speaker, investment in real estate is an expensive undertaking. As such, many investors look for innovative ways and look at a cocktail of investment options available to them. Honorable Speaker, the case of Cyton is a case of pooling funds so that they invest in any real estate asset for purposes of capital appreciation and rental income. Honorable Speaker, actually what happened in this case, Cyton went out of their way, set up various funds, set up various investment schemes, and invited members of the public to subscribe and pay some money for purposes of development and paying along the line as development goes on. Honorable Speaker, this is some kind of a pre-sale or sale on paper. Honorable Speaker, in this case, there are many cases that go wrong. Many of them have been executed successfully, but some cases go wrong. And this case of Cyton went wrong. Honorable Speaker, perusing through the report of the Public Petitions Committee clearly highlights some of the shortcomings or the shortfalls of this approach. One, there is no guarantee for return on investment. And if there's any guarantee, the guarantee is tied in mortar and bricks, which might not be a solution at all. Secondly, Honorable Speaker, this kind of an arrangement is not regulated anywhere. It's an unregulated investment. Consequently, there are no balances and checks to ensure security of investments. It's upon this understanding that one of the recommendations of the report is to call upon Capital Markets Authority to institute regulations that somehow rope in these people, this kind of investment, that are becoming popular and have been borrowed from the United States, to some extent United Kingdom. So, Honorable Speaker, one of the far-reaching recommendations that we need to pursue, and I want to invite the Committee of Finance and National Planning to pursue this recommendation to the final end, that this kind of arrangement is inevitable and it's a progressive approach to raising funds for real estate investment. We need, therefore, to have regulations. Number two, Honorable Speaker, yes, if you stake out that you are going to collect funds to undertake a project, it's incumbent upon you to ensure that you deliver. There are very many cases of stalled projects. The very many cases of delayed completion of the project is truly hurting very many investors in this country. I totally agree the recommendation that those directors, those who hold fiduciary responsibility in Cyton investment and the plethora of SPVs should be held personally responsible to the extent of their culpability so that we are able to solve this problem once and for all. Honorable Speaker, it allure to own housing and allure to pay over a long period of time makes everybody very culpable. Makes so sweet that, as Honorable Ferdinand Wanyonyi is saying, you can't resist it. And in any case, many times, they send very good marketers, very sweet, good-looking girls, and very well-dressed men to look for, to sell. And if they go to Honorable Wanyonyi, and I know, he's warning me, I wouldn't say anything, Honorable Speaker. I don't want Ismail, I don't want him to threaten me. So, Honorable Speaker, the long and the short of it, finally, regulations is important. Secondly, people must be held responsible for their decisions as they present themselves to the public. They must be held accountable. Those who have lost their money in this must be repaid, and where they fail to pay, those who are responsible, the assets must be liquidated so that we compensate the investors. With those few remarks, Honorable Speaker, I support the motion in the amended form. Thank you.
Honorable Atande is in the House. He is the mover of this motion, isn't he? No. Or is the chair of the petition? Is the chair here? Yeah? His vice. Who is the vice? Yeah? Honorable CitizenTV, are you the one who is standing in for your chair? You are the one replying? Give Honorable CitizenTV the mic, ask her. Give her the mic. Clerk, what's the problem? Are you the one replying?
I can.
Pardon?
Chair, I can do it.
It is not you can't do it. Are you the one replying or you are not?
I wasn't the one replying.
Where's your
I'll
chairman?
do it.
The chairman of your committee has been adversely mentioned here many times, and this is his motion. Before, how much time will you require? You have 10 minutes legitimately. There are members who are under tremendous pressure to me to say something. Will you need all the 10 minutes, or you need a few minutes so that I can allocate a few minutes to others?
I'll take a few minutes.
How many?
Honorable Speaker.
2,
Maybe
3
3 minutes.
3 minutes.
Yes, sir.
So I'll give Lillian Kogo 2 minutes. I'll give Polo 2 minutes. And Carol Omondi 1 minute. And Mukunji 1 minute. Start with Lillian. 2211.
Thank you so much, Honorable Speaker. I rise to support this report by the Public Petitions Committee, and as has been already said by honorable colleagues, Honorable Speaker, it is very, very important that those who want to engage themselves with the public by way of pooling resources so that they can initiate the ownership of property or houses, for that matter, hold themselves responsible, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, it is the desire of every Kenyan, every other family to own property or to own a house. Every one of us would want to own a house. Every one of us would want to own property in this country, and just to basically even a roof over a family's head. And if we pool our resources together on a certain investor, it is just important that these investors, Honorable Speaker, that they deliver. So as I support the amendments by the Honorable Atandi, I want to call upon those who are involved to be responsible in their undertakings so that people who invest their money can have responsible return on their investments. I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you very much, Right Honorable Speaker. I actually rise to oppose. I find it very intriguing the way the recommendations are couched on matters that are clearly regulated by established government agencies established by this parliament. We have the Capital Markets Authority, we have the judiciary, we have the central bank. All these matters should be dealt with by those competent bodies instead of parliament stepping in to micromanage the way business is conducted by the private sector. And if we continue this way, we probably would be criminalizing creativity in the business field. I'm strongly opposed to these recommendations. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Polo Chesumei.
Thank you, Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to also add weight on Honorable Atandi's proposal, or amendments rather, and I stand to support him strongly because this particular company, even the name itself, Cyton High Yield Solutions, the name itself actually would make people think that they're going to be multi-millionaires. So what I suggest is that going in the future, it will tame ministries and other regulatory bodies from imposing regulations on Kenyans without proper parliamentary approval. So I really support, I support him on that. And again, by imposing or making the DCI to investigate that company, it will assist many Kenyans to recover what they would have otherwise lost. And it will also ensure that all regulation undergo the right formulation of regulations. And again, it will help to bring order and sanity by protecting the people from irregular, punitive regulations. So I support the amendments made by Honorable Atandi. Thank you.
Gitonga Mukunji.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I want to put my support to the recommendations. And Honorable Speaker, a while back, I made a visit to the US through this House. And Honorable Speaker, I had a Zoom meeting with a number of 300 Kenyans in our diaspora in the US. And Honorable Speaker, these members have been swindled not once, but more than once by these companies that really promise high yields in investments such as houses. And I feel that this House will be failing if it leaves this issue to organizations that have not been able to solve this problem that has been existing for a while. Honorable Speaker, we need to update our regulations and have stringent measures that can protect investors that put their money in land and in houses and other
Thank you, Gitonga. Now, Honorable Member for Tarbo, Mama Setianei, you can now reply on behalf of your committee.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I beg to reply to this motion and take time to thank all the members for the contributions that they have made to this motion. Mr. Speaker, I also want to thank Honorable Atandi for bringing in the amendment, and also thank the members for adopting this report. Honorable Speaker, having listened to the petitioners as one of the members of the committee, it is actually prudent that the CEO and the partners be held liable for the loss of the investment to the customers or and the investors. Honorable Speaker, the petitioners that came in actually invested their money after saving for a long time. Some of them took loans to invest in this company, and they lost a lot of their money. Some of them used their retirement money to invest in this Cyton, and they lost their money. Therefore, we would want to strongly ask the DCI to actually investigate, to actually carry out a thorough investigation to the people who are culpable should be actually taken to court. And also, the relationship between the CEO and partners and CMA must be investigated so that these members can be able to get access to their money or compensated their money. Honorable Speaker, Honorable Speaker, most of the members that lost their money, some of them have gotten sick from what they told us. Some of them cannot even meet their hospital bills. And Honorable Speaker, to make it a warning to the other members or other companies who are actually doing the same business, we must ensure that DCI interrogates or investigates into this matter thoroughly so that those who are culpable can be brought to book. And therefore, Honorable Speaker, I support, as the motion went, I support, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Cyton. I see you have a walking aid. I wish you quick recovery. Honorable members, I now put the question, which is that this House adopts the report of the Public Petitions Committee on its consideration of a public petition number 07 of 2022 regarding probable loss of investments in Cyton high yield solution platform, laid on the table of the House on Thursday, 4th May 2023, subject to insertion of the following new recommendation number 4. The Directorate of Criminal Investigations undertakes thorough investigations on the matters listed hereunder within 90 days from the date of the adoption of the report. A. Affairs of Cyton, particularly on the matters raised in this petition, and prefer criminal prosecution against any person found culpable. B. The relationship between officials of Cyton and the Capital Markets Authority between the period 2015 and 2021. C. The business dealings of 49 SPVs, including their assets and liabilities, if any. And D. The business dealings of Mr. Edwin Harold Diane Dande, including his assets and liabilities. B. Renumbering paragraph 4, appearing on page 32 of the report as paragraph 5. As members of that opinion say aye. Will those of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Next order.
Order number 10, the Statutory Instruments Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 2 of 2023, second reading.
Chairperson, Select Committee on Delegated Legislation. Honorable Chepkonga.
Yes, thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I beg to move that this House adopts the report of the Committee on Delegated Legislation on its consideration of the Statutory Instruments Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 2 of 2023, laid on the table of the House on Wednesday, 14th June 2023, pursuant to Standing Order number 127, 4 of the National Assembly Standing Orders. Mr. Speaker, this is an amendment that the committee considered, and
Chepkonga.
yes,
You are very seasoned. I don't think you have started moving your bill properly.
I did.
All you need to do is to say, I beg to move, then read as it is, be read a second time. Then you embark on the trajectory that you appear to have taken.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I think I ran into some jam because I didn't have the...
Yes.
I didn't have the...
You are very seasoned. I think you...
No, it's just that I lost out on the order paper.
Go ahead. Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to move that the Statutory Instruments Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 2 of 2023 be now read a second time. If you don't have the order paper, I can lend you mine.
I don't have the order paper because I got the wrong one.
You got the wrong one.
I got the wrong order paper.
The clerk will lend you his order paper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thought I had the correct order paper.
You had the wrong one.
I had the wrong one. Honorable Speaker.
And I hope you don't have the wrong notes also.
No. It is very likely I do, but I'm sure they are the right notes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the Statutory Instruments Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 2 of 2023 be read a second time.
Very good.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that also that the House adopts the report of the Committee on Delegated Legislation on its consideration of the Statutory Instruments Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill.
There is no report to adopt, Honorable Chepkonga.
No, sorry,
You are moving the bill.
Yes, sorry, Mr. Speaker.
Yes. There's
Mr.
no
Speaker,
report before the House.
There was a report that we tabled, Mr. Speaker. I think
What did you have for lunch? You have the wrong notes.
I think I got the wrong things today. Mr. Speaker, sorry. So I think I was given the wrong notes, Mr. Speaker, but I have the bill. I will do with the bill, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, the bill seeks to amend Section 11 of the Statutory Instruments Act of 2013 by seeking, Mr. Speaker, to introduce a new amendment under subclause 5 that requires all statutory or regulatory making bodies to submit to this House within 7 days every regulations that they have made that they have not brought to this House. Mr. Speaker, the committee noted, and we have noted, Mr. Speaker, that there are so many regulations that have been made by those bodies that are expected to bring the regulations within 7 days as required by Section 11, but they have not brought them. And we have received some of them. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, we do not have any powers to do anything with those regulations that are a nullity in themselves. So this amendment seeks to give power to the committee to require the regulatory making authorities to bring those regulations that are a nullity to the House, and so that the committee nullifies them and requires that the clerk publishes the nullification in at least 2 newspapers of national circulation. And so that in short, Mr. Speaker, there are just 2 short amendments that we are bringing to this House. And the import of it is to give teeth to the committee to ensure that statutory making, those regulatory making bodies bring amendments, bring regulations to the House as required by Section 11 of the Statutory Instruments Act, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, the public need to be notified whenever we annul any regulations. We've been annulling a number of regulations, Mr. Speaker, and some of these regulatory making authorities do not even seek to notify the public that those regulations have been nullified or have been annulled. And so we want to require that the regulatory making authority publishes in two newspapers of national circulation the nullification by the committee. If they don't do so, Mr. Speaker, then the clerk of the National Assembly is required under the law to notify the public in 2 newspapers of national circulation. And so that basically, Mr. Speaker, are the amendments that we are seeking. Mr. Speaker, we have also noted that the Deputy Speaker has also sought to seek to amend the Statutory Instruments Act. And we will be proposing, Mr. Speaker, at the Committee of the House to move amendments so that we can carry those amendments, 2 amendments that have been proposed by the Deputy Speaker. And so we will be moving them in the 3rd reading. And so with those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, concerning these two short amendments, I would like to request the Vice Chair of the Committee on Delegated Legislation, the Honorable Kishimu, to second.
Honorable Kishimu. Give the honorable member mic.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to second the amendment to the Statutory Instruments Act, that is the Statutory Instrument Amendment Bill 2023. And Mr. Speaker, this matter has been raised before this House before, and the House seem or happened not to have a way forward in case a statutory or a regulatory making body does not forward or table the statutory instrument or the regulations within the required period of 7 days. And that is why, as a committee, we retreated and we thought we need to give this House or the Parliament direction as to what happens if that is not done. Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Article 94, sub-Article 6, the people of Kenya, through the Constitution, found it fit for Parliament, which has the sole authority to make law, to delegate that power to other bodies, because otherwise acts of Parliament would be very voluminous, and those statutory or those bodies can make regulations which also Parliament can be able to consider and approve, some through the Committee of Delegate and Registration, and some are also required under the Act, the Statutory Instrument Act, to be brought to the plenary for the House to approve. Mr. Speaker, we've also noted as a committee that statutory instruments or regulations normally come into force, into operation upon publication. And we've thought that during the committee of the whole House, it's also going to introduce an amendment that statutory instruments or the regulations can only come into force after Parliament has already considered. Because a scenario would appear whereby a statutory instrument has already been published, but after consideration by the committee or Parliament, we find that they never followed the requisite law or the Constitution, or they are out of bias, and we nullify them. What happens to the person who has already been prejudiced by that period when they were in operation? So we thought, because Parliament also acts with timelines, there is no statutory or regulatory making body that will be prejudiced by waiting for a month for the Parliament to consider the regulations and approve or annul them or guide them accordingly. So that is an amendment which we are also considering to make, and we urge this House to support the committee so that at least we don't have regulations which have serious ramifications being in force and also later on being annulled. Mr. Speaker, there is nothing much to add. The chair has already expounded on every aspect, and I was only seconding and supporting him, and we urge this House to support the committee to make these amendments. It is for the good of the Kenyans, it is for the good of the House, and to give directions, and also to be able to give the House teeth where there is none, and especially where a statutory making body arbitrarily makes regulations. They leave them for the public consumption without the House having an input into them. Mr. Speaker, I beg to second.
Honorable members, before I propose the question, allow me to acknowledge in the public gallery Gramo Joy Primary School from Embakasi South in Nairobi on my behalf. And on your behalf, I welcome the students and their teachers to Parliament. Honorable members, I now propose the question, which is that the Statutory Instruments Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 2 of 2023, be now read a second time. Yes, Gitonga Murugara.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support this bill. a very important bill, a very short one, but seeks to do fundamental amendments, which, as the movers of the bill have stated, have fundamental effect on what this House does. Many members of Parliament who are not lawyers would wonder what statutory instruments are, and especially when it comes to what ranking these instruments have in our hierarchy of laws. Statutory instruments are also known as the delegated legislation. It's also known as subsidiary legislation. This is legislation that flows from the acts of Parliament themselves, because in the penultimate sections of acts of Parliament, you will see the power donated to a body to make regulations under that act of Parliament. Those regulations are now what is known as statutory instruments, delegated legislation, or subsidiary legislation. Now, the proposed amendments are important in that what they seek to do is, if a body empowered by an act of Parliament to make regulations does make regulations but does not bring them to the House, the committee of this House, which is the Select Committee on Delegated Legislation, has the power to call for the tabling of those regulations within 7 days. And it's important to note that there is a default if they fail to do so. In as much as the new section, subsection 5, says that the instruments have to be submitted to Parliament, the correct position is that the instruments should be submitted to the National Assembly and not to Parliament. This is because where we make reference to Parliament, we are referring to the two houses of Parliament. As far as delegated legislation is concerned, it's a preserve of the National Assembly when it comes to regulations made by the national government. Senate does not have any role to play in those regulations unless the regulations touch on counties. And therefore, it is important to make this provision that the submission is to be made to Parliament. What happens where a regulatory making body fails to submit the regulations to Parliament? In the cases we speak today, those regulations continue to be in force until the House recalls the regulations and announces them, if that is what is supposed to be done. Now, we have a new subsection 6, which will automatically render those regulations a nullity. And the committee will actually inform the public within a given period of time that these regulations that were made by this body and which have been in force are now a nullity. And this has to be done in 2 newspapers of wide circulation. This is to ensure that nobody exploits the mischief to try and implement regulations that are null and void. It's also important to note that the government and any other body that makes regulations will have to take it very seriously that when you make regulations, you must bring them to the House for ratification, failure to which they are null and void and are of no consequence. Therefore, this is a very important piece of legislation, and with the amendments that are proposed, and what I'm proposing, that we delete the word Parliament in sub-regulation 5 and make it National Assembly, then this should carry the day as proposed. Honorable Speaker, I beg to support.
Thank you. Honorable Kaluma.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, let me first thank the House Committee on Delegated Legislation for bringing this bill, which I support, Honorable Speaker, save that I would be proposing a few amendments to the very provisions proposed in the bill to make it work better. Honorable Speaker, delegated legislation, as called, whether you call them subsidiary or subordinate legislation, derive from the fact that under Article 94 of the Constitution, the legislative authority of the nation is granted to Parliament. And so the primary legislative authority is with Parliament. Parliament, in most cases, will legislate directly. In other cases, Honorable Speaker, Parliament will delegate that legislative authority to other bodies, especially within the executive. And the reasons for delegated legislation, Honorable Speaker, is that number one, Parliament deals with a myriad of issues. So as a house in charge of legislation and other roles under Article 95 and 96, in terms of the respective roles of the two houses, we seldom have time as Parliament to give all the details you need in a legislation for the good governance of the people. And so that, Honorable Speaker, you walk across virtually all bills, if not most of the bills we pass as Parliament, you will get provisions delegating the power to make laws, which is initially invested in Parliament, to various regulation-making authorities, whether in the executive or in other bodies performing administrative functions. At times, Honorable Speaker, we are also faced with paucity of time. At other times, Honorable Speaker, Parliament is said not just to lack time, but the expertise, technical expertise, which may be needed for expeditious implementation of the various laws we make. And because of that, Honorable Speaker, Parliament will bear with skeletal frameworks, but provide for rule-making authority in other in other bodies. Honorable Speaker, because Parliament is the delegate, Parliament must supervise the exercise of that authority. And this is the reason as to why I find this bill not only timely, but useful. Parliament, as the body in charge of delegation, as mandated by the people and the Constitution, must always check to ensure that these various laws being generated by various regulation-making authorities on powers delegated or donated by Parliament, Honorable Speaker, are applied in a manner that is consistent with the law, in a manner that is consistent with the parent law, and in a manner that is in consonance with our values in terms of principles of governance. Honorable Speaker, it is therefore not acceptable, in my view, that a regulation-making authority can just make regulations and keep the regulations with themselves somewhere. Unlike parliamentary bills, which we have here, Honorable Speaker, every day. You know, bills, we go through the first reading, the whole citizenry will be informed there is a bill on this and this coming, including members of Parliament. We go to public participation at the second stage, and of course they'll still be told this and this is coming, what are your views on it? Delegated legislation, Honorable Speaker, Madam Speaker, does not have that benefit. They are generated in executive offices and within the offices of the regulation-making authorities. We, as Parliament, enacted the Statutory Instruments Act. And Honorable Speaker, I want to thank this Parliament and the membership who sit in that committee for electing my good friend, the Honorable Samuel Chepkonga, to chair this committee this time. I know in the other Parliament we had Honorable Murugara, the Deputy Speaker herself chaired this committee on delegated legislation when times were favorable and good before changes occurred. I remember, Honorable Speaker, you had a very good friend we miss in the House who was a nominated MP, who was also very zealous about this matter. But we worked with Honorable Samuel Chepkonga in the Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs before. And I can assure the House that when a committee chaired by Honorable Chepkonga, or Honorable Chepkonga as a person brings or proposes legislation to this House under his hand, it is something he has considered. I therefore support this because it does not just strengthen parliamentary supervision of the exercise of the power Parliament has delegated to those other bodies, which are proceeding with not much publicity in most of the times, which are proceeding without public participation most of the times, because it is only Parliament which is required to engage on that. This bill, Honorable Speaker, will secure that we have a leash on these bodies regulating authorities. And Honorable Speaker, when you look outside there, in fact, before this committee was enacted and the Statutory Instruments Act also got enacted, Honorable Speaker, there are just so many regulations, so many orders, so many rules, so many commissions, so many directives issuing outside there which fall within legislation and affect the governance of the people in terms of being part of the body of a law without notice. Honorable Speaker, that takes me therefore to clause 2 of the bill, and let me say something very briefly on them, having justified the need for the bill generally in terms of improvements which need to be made. Honorable Speaker, at subsection 5, it says that the committee shall require regulation making authority. Honorable Speaker, I find this to be superfluous. If not superfluous, I find it to be redundant. And I'm sorry to use the latter word. Superfluous because this Parliament, either as a House or through its committees, already is mandated by Article 125 of the Constitution to require anybody that is under its charge, whether in the plenary as a House or as a committee, to submit and to do whatever the House will do. And in those rare cases which fall under Article 125, Honorable Speaker, you have situations where Parliament can even summon these bodies. So I don't think it adds anything, I may be corrected, when we say the committee shall require. The committee already has the capacity in law, is empowered in law to require if they are minded to do so. And so I don't see the value of this provision unless in continuing deliberations and debate, it will be explained that this is going to add. Honorable Speaker, at the proposed 2.6, it is being proposed that if there is failure, then the committee will publish in 2 newspapers of wide circulation a notice confirming that, of course, the regulations that they are dealing with in this context no longer has effect. Honorable Speaker, 2 or 3 issues. Number 1, these delegated legislations are laws, save that they are made on delegated authority. As a matter of parliamentary practice, only laws which are already made are published, and they are published in the Gazette. You don't publish law which has been nullified. And even if or where you were to publish rejection, and I ask Honorable Chepkonga to get me on this, because I want to support, but allowing him to improve. Whether you publish rejection or revocation or annulment of a law, or the existence of a law, the document for that publication is not the newspaper, but the government printers, the Kenya Gazette. So I would be requesting Honorable Chepkonga that the fact of nullification, revocation, or rejection of a statutory instrument, and I would beg this be implemented, goes to having that fact published, not even the entire body of regulations, but just within the Gazette notice indicating, because it is the only official public Gazette, you indicate such and such regulations promulgated by such regulation-making authority has been revoked for the area of law to be cleansed. And I believe that would be neater. Number 2, Honorable Chepkonga and the members, I think it will save costs on.
Don't have a mic? Okay, there it is. The Honorable Member from Bear and North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to support this amendment, Madam Speaker, I sit on Committee of Delegate and Registration. And Madam Speaker, we have seen quite a number of regulations coming to the committee. And I can tell this House, without missing ones, that in this country we have serious cartels which come through regulations. And more so, there is a regulation which we annulled, which was proposed by the Minister of Education. If such a regulation was to be put into effect, Madam Speaker, a lot of chaos within the sector of higher education will be witnessed in this country. It's extremely important this amendment to be supported, Madam Speaker, because the scrutiny of the members here who speaks and who works on behalf of the people of the Republic of Kenya, the interests of the people must be well taken care of. We have some crooks within the ministries, those who would want to make laws using the back door. We must take care of such kind of individuals. Laws which mostly want to benefit themselves. Because, Madam Speaker, there is no reason whatsoever why a regulation should pass in this House or should be made by technocrats in different ministries. For instance, ensuring that the private universities get funds from public coffers. Ensuring that if an institution does not have more than 50 acres of land, cannot qualify to be an institution of higher learning. So by this amendment, we will ensure only well-thought regulations will be able to pass and will be able to regulate how the people of the Republic of Kenya or how the institutions in the Republic of Kenya operates. These are very well considered and well-thought amendment, Madam Speaker, so that we can align everything and operations of different institutions. The other time we witnessed, Madam Speaker, a regulation which was enforced by the Central Bank of Kenya, that withdrawing 1 million Kenya shilling is a problem. And I'm sure that regulation never was not discussed in this House. So Kenyans have gone through difficult times. Kenyans have gone through inconveniences because of a few people in our ministries who have been entrusted this responsibility, and some of these responsibilities are so sacred, but they don't take those responsibilities seriously. It is therefore very important, Madam Speaker, we consider this amendment proposed by the Chair of the Delegated Committee, or proposed by the Committee of the Delegated Registration, so that we streamline the way laws are developed and the way laws are taken out there to be consumed or to regulate our society. Madam Speaker, I support this amendment. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Tinderet, Honourable Julius Melly. Can you just give me my mic to control by myself? Okay, thank you. Okay, he put the intervention button and left. The Honourable Member for Ruiru. Honourable Simon Kingara. Again, he's absent. The Honourable Member for Mwingi West, Charles Ngusia. The Honourable Jerry Minor? No? Yeah. Okay, you're there. You're not speaking on this one? Okay. The Honourable Catherine Omayo, Member for Busia.
I just arrived. Give me 10 minutes.
Whoever wants to contribute to this particular topic, press the intervention button. Okay, now there you go. The Honorable Member for Tiati. Honorable William Kamket.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to support this bill. Madam Speaker, I believe that this bill is timely, it's long overdue. As a former member and chairperson of the Committee on Delegated Legislation, I speak, Madam Speaker, with the benefit of hindsight. That, Madam Speaker, when I was a member of that committee and a chairperson, we almost became the committee of annulments. We were almost being referred to as the committee of annulments. Because, Madam Speaker, at every time statutory instruments were referred to the committee, the membership of the committee, in their wisdom, found out that most of the issues in the regulations were either against the Constitution, ultra vires the Constitution, or illegal outrightly. And Mr. Speaker, therefore, we had no choice but to annul those regulations. But as earlier spoken by a member, Mr. Speaker, we had to do that when Kenyans had already suffered a lot of damages. So, Honorable Speaker, I think it is long overdue that this House takes charge of its constitutional duty by supervising the delegation of lawmaking to those entities to ensure that, Madam Speaker, every other statutory instrument, in whatever form they come, has the full force of the law, has undergone thorough public participation, which is the major issue as we annul those regulations. Most of those statutory instruments, statutory making bodies, always, because they knew what they were doing, ensured that they never undertook public participation. So, Madam Speaker, by the introduction of this bill, Parliament shall regain its full authority as the only body recognized by the Constitution that has the authority to make law. So with those remarks, Madam Speaker, I beg to support.
The Honourable Member for Funyula, Honourable Wilberforce Oundo.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I stand to comment on this proposed amendment to Statutory Instrument Bill Act, and I do so, Honourable Speaker, being a former member of the committee, and truly your chairmanship, as well as the chairmanship of CAMCET, and that committee also had Sir George, had Mr. Honourable Gishimo, and the Speaker's panel, Martha Wangari. Honourable Speaker, this is an area we have grappled with for many, many years during the 12th Parliament on how to enforce or how to entrench the role of Parliament in statutory instruments. Honourable Speaker, there had been this feeling all over the statutory making authorities, regulatory making authorities, that delegated legislation or statutory instruments are not necessarily a law as is envisaged in the Constitution. And I think with the passing of this act as then in the 11th Parliament, and this amendment, I see a very clear signal is being sent to government ministries, to constitutional bodies, that regulations or subsidiary regulations are as good as the law. However, Honourable Speaker, the amendments are well intentioned, and I hope the chairman is listening. The amendments are well intentioned, might not be strong enough, might not be direct enough to cure the problem we have grappled with. Honorable Speaker, even the Parent Act is expressly clear that a statutory instrument that's required to be laid before Parliament, if not laid before Parliament, it has no legal effect. And that I'll refer to them to clause 11, section 11(4), that clearly says, in such an instrument shall cease to have effect immediately after the last day for it to be laid, to be so laid, but without prejudice to any act done and the statutory instrument before it became void. Probably the point of departure, or the most important aspect of amendment I would have thought they would have moved, is to delete that last part of the, clause 4, subclause section 4, section 11(4), that makes it that there was legal consequences, legal approval during the period before it's laid on the floor of the House. That's where probably the rain started beating us. That's where the major amendments needs to focus on. And I want to request the Vice Chair, we sat with you, you remember how we went through it. That's where the crux of the amendments need to be directed to. Honorable Speaker, the committee, any committee of the House, makes laws or reviews. It does any acts as delegated authority of the floor of the House. So therefore, Honorable Speaker, allowing the committee to usurp the role of Parliament might seem to be unprocedural and might be unconstitutional. That's why the committee of the whole House, reference should be removed, reference to the committee and reference to Parliament. Honorable Speaker, indeed, it's a requirement that any regulations as stated in the Constitution and even the respective act cannot have a full force of law unless it's passed by the Parliament. Again, as my colleague Honorable Kaluma has said, a regulatory authority or a regulation is a law. And where do we publish laws? We publish laws in the Kenya Gazette. We debate here and publish laws in the Kenya Gazette. And again, as he has mentioned, a law that has not been passed by Parliament is no law. So there's no really any need to again and go and publish in a newspaper that a law has not been passed. What are we saying? Are we saying that we have got a rogue executive? Are we saying that we have got a rogue regulatory making authority? Are we saying we have got a rogue state departments that will proceed to implement and enforce a regulation that is not law? Enforce or attempt to implement any legislative proposal that is not law. So therefore, Honorable Speaker, it will be superfluous and a waste of time to again publish in the newspapers that a law has been annulled. I know truly you as the Speaker, you have an amendment concerning regulatory authority regulations that have expired. This is where probably we need to put in place that once it expires naturally. Any authority, any state organ that continues to implement an expired law is contravening the Constitution, is illegal, and is actually unfair to the people of Kenya. So, Honorable Speaker, as the amendments are well-intentioned, truly well-intentioned, I would ask the committee to retreat, relook at them afresh, consult widely, let us make the case more neater, more tighter, to avoid a situation where, Honorable Speaker, we pass a law that does not solve the problem that we are intending to solve. Because many of these bills that we pass here that become an act of Parliament are actually put meat into it that are implemented through regulations, rules, and the like of those things. So we must tighten the process very clearly that we do not subject typical Kenyans to suffering those who do not understand. With those few remarks, Honorable Speaker, I support, but I request, and we will move amendments at the committee of the whole House to attend to the shortcomings of the proposed amendment. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
The Honorable Member for Butula, Joseph Oyula.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to also contribute to this very important amendment. Honorable Speaker, regulations are made mainly by the executive arm of the government, and they are meant to support the existing acts. The acts are parliamentary acts which have the authority. The law only allows Parliament to make, to come up with the acts. So if the regulations are derived from these acts by the executive, it's only fair, Madam Speaker, that these regulations are submitted to Parliament for approval or ratification. So any regulations that has been made by the executive without passing through the National Assembly should be considered as null and void. Madam Speaker, we have gone through a lot of pains, particularly from the Central Bank of Kenya, where regulations have been made which have been very punitive to the ordinary mwananchi. But Central Bank could not bring those regulations to Parliament to ratify. So it is important that now, if this is, amendment goes through, and it should be made very clear that any regulations that have not been cleared by Parliament should not be allowed to be applied by the various executive arms. So, Madam Speaker, I strongly support this amendment and ask the committee concerned to ensure that any improvements to this amendment, if need be, should be made so that it becomes tight for any executive arm of government to come up with regulations that will be punitive to the ordinary mwananchi and which have no force of law. So with those few remarks, Madam Speaker, I support this amendment and ask the committee to go further and make sure that the bill is watertight. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Your South, is it possible for me to manage my own mic? Is it possible for me to manage my own mic? Because you seem to be doing it, or is it damaged? Okay, proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to support the amendment by Honorable Chepkonga and the Committee of the Delegated Legislation. I must also say that I'm a member of that committee. And Madam Speaker, I start by defining what is this statutory instrument. According to Statutory Act of 2013, it defines the statutory instrument as any rule, any order, any regulation, any direction, any form or tariff of costs or fees, warrant, proclamation, by law, resolution, guideline, or any other statutory instrument made or established in the execution of a power conferred by the Act of Parliament. Madam Speaker, we have the Constitution of Kenya. After the Constitution, we have the Acts of Parliament. But not everything will be covered by the Acts of Parliament. What remains is what the law allows that the executive can come up through the ministers or the cabinet secretaries through the regulations. But now, as per the Statutory Instruments Act of 2013, there is a laid down procedure for this to happen. You must do public participation. You must establish an impact assessment on the same. But what we are seeing now is the abuse of the same. People come up with regulations, they don't bring it to Parliament, and they make it to be law. So to check on this abuse, I support the amendment so that if a cabinet secretary comes up with a regulation or any body that comes with a regulation, if they don't bring those regulations within the 7 days to this house, because the only body which is allowed to make laws is Parliament. If it does not come to the Committee of Delegated Legislation and it is not brought to this house, those regulations are deemed to be null and void. So it is upon these regulation-making bodies to make sure that within the 7 days, they come up after they publish in the Kenya Gazette, they bring those regulations to this house, and if they don't do so, it is annulled by the house through a Kenya Gazette. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honorable Member for Yatta, Honorable Robert Basil.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I raise to support this motion by the delegated authority. Under Article 94B of the Constitution, Parliament is the only body given the authority to make laws. So any other body purporting to make laws is null and void. So I fully support these amendments, and we need to be really careful so that we don't lose our function as members of Parliament. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honorable Member for Kinangop, Honorable Thuku Kwenya. Honorable Member for Tinderet, you'll wait because you've gone to the bottom of the list. Let's finish with the people who are here. Proceed, Member for Kinangop is not available. Okay, the Honorable Julius Ruto. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Madam Speaker, for this opportunity to give my voice to this intended amendment on Statutory Instruments Act. And Madam Speaker, from the onset, I want to state that delegated simply means that you are ceding part of your power to a third party. And when you delegate, it is expected of you to supervise and to give an okay to whatever it is you delegated, whatever it is to the other party. And Madam Speaker, it is of interest that when Parliament delegates, we do not get an opportunity to look back and to see what it is that we ask the other party to do, and especially now on this matter where we allow executive to legislate to the extent that now they publish before the same is brought to the House for ratification. And Madam Speaker, as the prior speakers have stated, it cannot be law until it is brought to this House, because it's only this House that is mandated by the Constitution to make laws. Madam Speaker, it has given me a lot of trouble to imagine that we have laws, also to say purported laws, that are being implemented and even cited in courts of law that never saw the light of this House. But anyway, they became law because they were published. And therefore, this amendment would not have come at a better time. Madam Speaker, I would wish that the Committee on Delegated maybe should look deeper to maybe further amendments, and especially to the issue whereby the executive legislates, the same law regulations are brought to this committee for consideration, and after the Committee on Delegated Legislation okays these regulations, they are published without getting to the floor of the House. Madam Speaker, it's my considered opinion that even if regulations pass, or they are passed by the Delegated Registration Committee, they be brought to this House for ratification, just like we do with treaties and conventions, so that then they have the force of the National Assembly and Parliament as it is envisaged in the Constitution. Madam Speaker, you realize that the only time that regulations regulations are brought to this House is when Delegated Legislation Committee feels that they should be done away with. In fact, that is self-defeating, because they bring the regulations to the House for annulment, as opposed to the fact that they should be brought to the House for enforcement and to get the power of the National Assembly. I wish to support the amendment and wish that the same committee does a more better job by making sure that we do not place the horse before the cart. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Keses, Honourable Julius Ruto.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker, for according me this opportunity. First of all, I stand to support the amendment by Chepkonga and to take this moment to congratulate my senior Chepkonga, being a seasoned lawyer and a seasoned politician, leading a very important committee on ensuring that we have a regulatory framework in the Republic of Kenya that suits the intention, that suits the spirit of the Constitution. Article 1 of the Constitution that discusses the powers belongs to the citizens, and it can be exercised through people's representation. And in this case, Madam Speaker, looking at what has been happening, especially on the regulatory framework system, the people who have been endowed with delegated powers to make these particular regulations, well, looking at the real intention of the law as to why it allowed that, the Statutory Instruments law, is that an intention of ensuring it facilitates faster establishment of legal framework that supports the coexistence of people's social needs of the people or given specific operationalization of a given law. However, looking from the practice at the moment, most of these persons who have been endowed with this power have come up with certain regulations at times. If you look at them, serve some specific interest. Some of them have gone to an extent of harassing, an extent of extorting, an extent of intimidating, an extent of even reversing the original spirit of the Constitution of the Republic of Kenya. And therefore, this amendment seeks to reverse back the power of the people to where it belongs through the people's representative. And therefore, I stand to support this particular amendment and to say that each and every regulatory body that has been given powers to make regulations should seek to reflect what does the law say, what does the Constitution say. And the right people and the right place for this one, for this reflection, is nowhere else other than the House, the legislative house and arm of the government, which is this particular national parliament. Madam Speaker, I also seek to that this particular amendment again should go further than beyond the national government as it is here. Also going back to the county governments, we will appreciate that most regulations passed by county governments has been harassing members of public, especially on the business practice. It has been inhibiting expansion of business, but rather seeks to extort and infringe the space of doing business because of constant regulation, over-regulation, serving specific purpose of oppressing people, of seeking to mine even to the lesser people who need to be supported. Laws are meant to support, laws are meant to encourage, laws are meant to cultivate, laws are meant to create that environment that brings about coexistence. But rather regulations that we are seeing nowadays, especially at county government has been used and misused to the extent that people have suffered much than the intention of the law of encouraging an enabling environment to traverse well. So, Madam Speaker, allow me to take this opportunity and to support this amendment and to say time has come that Parliament needs to take its space. Thank you so much, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Tinderet, Member for Honourable Julius Meli, and that's the last one on the intervention button. So any member who wants to contribute to this, kindly press the intervention button. Member for Mwingi West, I've seen.
Thank you.
Popped up. Please press your intervention button.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to support the amendment by the Committee on Delegated Legislation. And this amendment is quite very important. It is an amendment that is administrative. Madam Speaker, this House is actually mandated by the Constitution to be the law-making arm of government. It legislates. But however, this House also delegates powers through the Statutory Instrument Act to other government agencies, bodies, to make regulations, to give orders, and to also make laws that should always be ratified by the House. But it has come to the attention of this House severally, Madam Speaker, that certain government agencies and institutions make regulations
knowing very well that it is not yet, it cannot be implemented without the authority of the House, they bypass that and actually publish it and order the citizens and the public to follow those regulations without even going through the relevant departmental committee that oversights that particular government agency or institution. As if that's not enough, they also do not take their regulations through the Committee on Delegated Legislation. This one actually has brought a number of, some of the regulations are even not in tandem with the law. That's why, by bringing these two amendments, it is actually going to rein in on rogue government agencies and institutions that are, at times, bring regulations that actually inhibit even the developments that are necessary in this country. Two, Madam Speaker, at times government agencies also, at times statutory institutions or bodies develop regulations, and after having developed them, they actually put them on the drawer. The public is not aware of them. The public, and yet they expect the public to know this. This particular amendment is actually making it compulsory and a requirement that any statutory instrument be made public, be circulated, and any institution that does not follow the law, all that they publish are actually a nullity. And I want to thank the wisdom of delegated legislation, because this is actually reining in on institutions that have all the time been actually effecting laws that are illegal. A case in point is the central bank. The other day, we actually annulled the university's regulations. So many regulations are being implemented in this country, and yet they lack footfall of the law, because before they are implemented, they are supposed to come to the delegate legislation, the oversight departmental committee, and to the House to actually ratify them. So the fact that they have been implementing them is actually illegal, and the officers who actually do this need to be surcharged. And I want to ask the delegated legislation, when we are at the committee of the whole, of the committee of the House, we actually have to insert that institutions that go ahead and implement regulations which contravenes the laid down procedure on how these regulations are supposed to be taken through are supposed to be surcharged, they are supposed to be punished, and those particular regulations become null and void. I support this particular very important amendment, Honorable Speaker. Thank you.
Do we have the Honorable Mwangi Kiunjuri, MP for Laikipia East? Not in the House. The Honorable Gikaria, MP for... is there? Yes, I want him to talk, because as a minister, he used to make some of these regulations. So give him the mic.
I'm in the House, but I would rather step down so that I can second the next motion.
Okay. Oh, yeah, thank you. The Honorable, where is Honorable Gikaria? Your card appears to have a problem. Yeah, but give Honorable Gikaria to make his contributions.
Honorable Speaker, I rise to support. You know, Honorable Speaker, this amendment which has been brought, the Statutory Instrument Amendment Bill 2023, which has been brought by the chair of the delegated legislation. Honorable Speaker, sometimes it becomes very difficult for us to contribute after seasoned lawyers like you have contributed. And given all the facts that we had in mind, it's like you picked. You know, I was listening to you, Honorable Speaker, when you are contributing, and I totally agree with you, Honorable Speaker, that if the only document that becomes lawful is the Kenya Gazette, then a newspaper that has a nationwide circulation is of no effect. And I totally agree with you, Honorable Speaker, that the laws that are supposed to be done in this House, we must protect the functions of Parliament under Article 94. And it is important that Parliament, being the only body that makes law, be given that responsibility. And sometimes when you now have to say that, you know, like myself, I can't see any penalty for a person who publishes regulations which have not gotten the nod or approval of Parliament, just walks scot-free after Parliament has now comes and declares that regulation null and void. Honorable Speaker, the worst that came to us was the central bank that was given by the central bank governor on matters to do with banking regulations that you cannot withdraw unless you start. And I totally agree, Honorable Speaker, that Parliament is the only body that is supposed to, and I totally agree, sometimes it is important for us as we make laws not to demean the powers and the existing law. Because as much as anybody would want to make a law, particularly these, the other executive arm of the government, maybe be it a cabinet secretary or, and I remember the other day we were just making some laws. And the cabinet secretary now tells us, no, you know, I'm bringing some regulations that you have to wait once you have passed your law. Don't effect the law until I bring the regulations. And you know, the Honorable Speaker, there is an act of Parliament which was never came into force just because there are somebody who put a cap that you cannot operationalize that act and until a regulations has been brought. So I totally agree with you, Honorable Speaker, and it's good. We learn from the best what you have said and the contribution that you gave. In fact, we are just repeating, so I beg to support, Honorable Speaker.
I thank you very much, Chair, Committee in charge of Environment. In fact, in your sector, there are so many regulations, and I'm happy at your contribution in the matter. The Honorable Charles Ngusia, MP for Mwingi West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity. Indeed, let me take this opportunity to congratulate and thank the Committee of Delegated Legislation for coming up with this very important, actually, memorandum in this House, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, from the beginning, let us note that we are the people and we represent people in this country. And any decision that is made for the people to benefit must actually come through us and through consultative process, Mr. Speaker. And I'm saying this because some of these government agencies have come up with very infamous laws and bylaws, Mr. Speaker. And you find that the cry always comes through Parliament, and most of them, Kenyans end up actually bearing with them without necessarily benefiting from them, Mr. Speaker. That is why I'm emphasizing it is very important, because by doing so, we are creating awareness to our people, what law it's meant for us and what benefit we are supposed. Even by doing so, we are going to strengthen some of these important laws our government agencies have been actually making. And by bringing it here, we can even propose more ideas to them, Mr. Speaker. Without laboring so much, Mr. Speaker, I wish to support, because even by discussing it through the floor of the House and the House of the Representatives, Mr. Speaker, it is going to eliminate some of the weaknesses we have been seeing with these bylaws. And Mr. Speaker, with those few remarks, I fully support.
Thank you very much, Honorable Charles Ngusia. Do we have the Honorable John Mutungwa?
Yes. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Honorable John Mutunga, you must be assured immediately you are done, the Deputy Speaker will be contributing to this matter.
Okay.
So be as concise and to the point as much as possible.
That is quite okay, Honourable Speaker. Honourable Speaker, I just want to say a few things. Honourable Speaker, it is wrong for the CSS to be left alone to do regulations. It is extremely wrong because regulations are supposed to implement the existing laws. In some cases, you realize that even before the law is changed, some CSS will definitely come up with regulations, like we witnessed in the agricultural sector last year. In July last year, a set of coffee regulations was gazetted, and people started using these regulations. Unfortunately, these regulations enhanced those people who were out to destroy the sector. So we had to work extremely hard when we came in this time to have those regulations withdrawn because they had already misled or misdirected the sector. So, Honourable Speaker, it is important for us to secure that loophole. My understanding of how things work is that the Constitution is interpreted through law, and law is interpreted and implemented through the regulations. And whenever we are making any law, we are referring to the extent to which regulations should be interpreted so that they can effectively implement this particular law or elaborate the law for the users. When we have omission, or rather omission of this House, in terms of when this House is avoided from looking at the regulations, it gives us problems. The other issue, Honourable Speaker, there is also a serious omission that we need to see how we can plug it up. And I would like maybe the Committee on Delegated Legislation to think through it. Either to be co-opting technical committee members when they are discussing regulations of a certain sector, or to have the regulations looked through by a technical committee for them to be sure that they have effectively captured all the details in a specific legislation, so that we do not have loopholes. Because sometimes a Committee on Delegated Legislations will look through regulations, and then there are some issues that probably may be omitted. So we need to have that particular loophole sealed. The other issue, Honourable Speaker, is that when we come up with regulations, sometimes regulations, the levels of comprehensiveness of these regulations is doubtful. We do not have sufficient capture of what is supposed to be done. And this is because of avoidance of following the actual route. Sometimes they may lead to us to doing the wrong things. And because we understand sometimes, like, some regulations have been enforced for 3 years or so, which have been specifying the wrong things and misleading Kenyans, and they are making Kenyans not achieve their objectives. So it is important for this House to debate the regulations so that we can be sure the correct version of regulations is one in force, and therefore the correct law is being interpreted and the correct thing is done. So amendment of this particular, the instrument is key, and I do support that amendment, Honourable Speaker. Thank you very much.
The Honorable Deputy Speaker, MP for Washingishu County and my former teacher.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. That's my claim to fame, that I taught some clever people, including yourself. Yes, he was one of the good students. So, Honorable Speaker, thank you for the opportunity to be able to lend my voice to this very, very important bill, the Statutory Instruments Amendment Bill of 2023. Like has earlier been said by Honorable Chepkonga, Chairperson for the Delegated Legislation Committee, is that I had a similar bill, but we have merged it so that we can be able to prosecute one bill. Honorable Speaker, as I speak here, I speak not only as someone who was previously chairperson for the 12th Parliament Committee on Delegated Legislation, but also as a total public servant, having served in all 3 arms of government. Honorable Speaker, my experience has been, there's been many challenges relating to the Statutory Instruments Act. The reason has been that it had loopholes that has lent itself to abuse by various members of the executive, that they could actually pass legislation through the back door. Previously, the law allowed a situation where a cabinet secretary or a statutory institution could publish regulations in the Kenya Gazette, submit them to the clerk of the National Assembly within 7 days. And while it was pending in the Committee of Delegated Legislation for 28 days, the regulations would take effect, and Kenyans would start having to abide by them. If they were to pay any penalties, they would start paying them. In the meantime, the committee would be considering that particular regulation. And usually, by the time that the regulation would be annulled in the committee and by the House, it would have already caused irreparable harm and damage to Kenyans. At that time, the mischief was that this particular institute time amended this instrument, this act, to say that it's 28 sitting days, so that it could protect us from mischief at the time when we were on recess. Because we found that the ministries were publishing the regulations while we were on recess. And by the time we came back, we had 3 days left, and the law that time permitted that they take effect if we don't act. So by omission, they would actually end up, ministers would become more powerful than parliament. Even after we made that change, they discovered, and I can give you examples of the ones that happened. I still remember the regulations banning shisha were passed when we were on Christmas recess. And by the time we came back in January, they had taken effect. But at that time, they were not being done for the good of getting rid of a harmful product in the market. It was going to Christmas, and they wanted to boost the sales of cigarette companies and certain alcohol companies. So they were serving private interests, not public interest. Another example I can give you that was done, again, to serve private people was the ban of the one-use plastic in our supermarkets. Many people did not notice it, but the mischief was they would do it when we were on recess. They did it when we were on recess. And they published that I remember it was the Ministry of Environment at that time. And they published the banning of those particular plastics, which was a good thing on the face of it. But the story behind the story was they already had their own friends who bought the alternative bags and had them waiting at the port. That's why you should ask yourself as Kenyans, how is it that plastic was banned today and tomorrow we went to the supermarket and there was a new type of paper bag and carrier bag? Because it was a business. So in fact, I'm asking Honorable Chepkonga, as the sitting chairperson of the delegated committee, to completely continue interrogating this particular Statutory Instruments Act, and don't get tired of bringing amendment after amendment to this House, as and when you discover a new mischief and a new loophole. Another example I can give you is by the mischievous chairperson of the Salaries and Remuneration Commission, Ms. Lynn Mengich. She waited again when members of parliament had already gone to recess for elections. Then she publishes something in the Kenya Gazette when we had no power to come back to the House to interrogate what she had done. That must stop. Let us send a very clear message to the ministers and state corporations that we are watching, and Parliament will not allow this to happen. I know another existing mischief that was there is that usually, I know that I used to be called the committee of annulment, because the only time we came to the House is when the law required us only to come to the House when we were annulling a regulation. But actually, we approved 70% of the regulations. But 30% that were for annulment had to come to the House. But now I'm glad that under this amendment, the committee will have to every 3 months, quarterly, or every 3 months, bring a list and report to the House those particular pieces of regulation that they have approved, so that the entire House, which is the one that has the substantive legislative making power and mandate under the Constitution, can be kept abreast of the goings-on on those issues. Another issue was the issue, lastly, the issue of what was defined as public participation. I know we brought in amendments and we began to define what is public participation. Is it calling a few of your friends in a room and like-minded people, and then you resign for us and tell the committee, oh, we have undertaken public participation? We said public participation must be relevant stakeholders. Not everybody in the world, but at least relevant stakeholders. And now we saw the mischief that went on recently with the regulations around the education sector, where publications were being made from the ministry. Now, we must also put it in there, or it's not even there, it's common sense, that if the minister is publishing regulations that touch on the education sector, then the committee on education in Parliament is a relevant stakeholder, and they must be invited as part of public participation. After all, they are the ones who vote money to that particular entity. And lastly, sorry, I forgot one more point. I know that there had been a suggestion, but Honorable Chepkong has told me that he's willing to amend it, where there was the amendment saying that where a law has since been nullified, it should be published in the newspapers to notify members of the public. But we know that the official communication and publication for government is the Kenya Gazette, because this can also be a money-making thing for the rogue newspapers that we already have. So, and we'll also be spending a lot of unavailable government resources. For that, I beg to support with those few interventions. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I hope Honorable Owen Bayer now knows you can only be good if you learn from the best. Honorable Kuria Kimani.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And maybe from where we left, where we know you are an accomplished lawyer, and you know who your lecturer is, the legendary boss Sholei. There has been a very ongoing debate on Twitter about this lawyer called Brian, who has won 24 out of 26 cases in court, only for law in 1 year, only for the Law Society of Kenya to realize the guy has never gone to law school, he's not a practicing lawyer, and it has really elicited international debate. I was seeing, I think it is on the Daily Mail in UK, you know, actually talking about the fake lawyer who won 24 cases. And the comments there are very hilarious. They were saying that he should first of all represent himself in that court case and win his own court case against his fake certificate. But maybe my advice, Atwoli weighed in and said the Law Society of Kenya should realize prior learning and just admit him. But maybe because we may not be able to change the law to accommodate him, I think I will encourage him to enroll to law school. With his brilliance, I know he will be able to do that in a very few years. But this really tells us the opportunities that some Kenyans miss just because they did not go to a class. And that does not necessarily mean that they are not intelligent. And that's why, although I pride myself in being an A student, I usually say that passing exams is not a measure of intelligence. And Brian is a very good example of that. In fact, one of the people was saying that all the qualified lawyers who lost the cases against Brian should all be deregistered, because how do you lose a case against, but that's on a light note, Honorable Speaker. I rise to support this statutory amendments bill. Honorable Speaker, Article 94.
Honorable Kimani Kuria.
Yeah.
You know, cases are not won because of who the lawyer is, but because of what the law says to a set of facts. So that gentleman you are talking about could just have been on the right side of facts. But number two, if you spoke with Honorable Chepkonga, who is a senior counsel in my own estimation, and I think he should be made one formally because substantively is, he would tell you that great lawyers, you know, like Paul Muite, never went to the university. We had what we called article clerkship. If you associated with law for some time to a level that you can speak, we would take you through the process of certification to become an advocate. But that is a by the way. To say you are right, and those who are saying he breached the law are also right. Let us see how it goes.
Law is not my forte, so if you're talking about accounting, I will make a good contribution to it. But anyway, he won all his cases. Whether it is a statement of fact, then
he was speaking about, out of on the sides.
Yes, that was on a light note. I know you know that you are one of the great minds, legal minds I respect a lot in this parliament, and you make very good contributions. Whether it is, and then I don't have any GCDF funds, just to let the chair of jail of delegate legislation here. No, I'm only a part